We'll go to the next speaker. We have the third keynote speaker, Mariko Takagi. Yeah, she's a typographer from Japan. Mariko is a typographer and author and designer of a book and associate professor based in Japan. She likes to explore and understand the intermediary between the Western and Japanese culture in general, and between Latin letters and Japanese Chinese letters in particular. Typography is her passion, her form of expression, and at the same time, her subject of research. Mariko Takagi, in 2010, she moved from Germany to Hong Kong. This move from Latin letter-based environments to a bilingual Latin letters and Chinese characters gave her a new inspiration and insights to multilingual typography culture. Since April 2017, she is located in Kyoto, Japan. Let's try to understand the hope and design from her personal thoughts and possible correlations. Over to Mariko Takagi.
Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction. So usually I'm talking about typography, and I've been visiting the typography days, I think 4 times. And mainly like when I was in Hong Kong, like when I was living in Hong Kong. But today, like I do not want to talk about typography or about my research in general, but more about something that was bothering me, like after knowing the theme of this conference this time. So the conference theme is as everyone knows, hope. And we are talking about design in this conference. So I decided like to do kind of a brainstorming and just take you on this journey with me and let you just participate in like how I try to connect the idea of hope to design. So maybe like in the last 2 years, you all also experienced that like educating designers or being a designer sometimes let us think about like the meaning of our profession or of our like work or maybe of our doing. So, and I had this as well because I'm teaching now, typography and graphic design, book design for almost 20 years. And of course, like the question in those kind of like difficult situations or maybe difficult moments is whether it makes sense to do or to keep on doing design. So when I received the invitation to this conference this time, I was just reading a book, and this became also like maybe one of the inspiration for this talk. And I will talk about this before I start looking into like 3 different cases of design where I think hope is correlation or is in a correlation. And finally, like I would like to just talk about inspiration and food for creativity. So maybe let me start with the first topic. And I named this Hope is the Last to Die. And I just said that I was reading a book when I got the email by Ravi inviting me for this conference. And the book was from Viktor Emil Frankl. And it is in English, it is called Man's Search for Meaning, an introduction to logotherapy. And I was reading this book because I'm preparing myself for the next semester, and I'm having a course or a class which I'm sharing with 2 other professors at my faculty. And in this class, we are talking about 3 books. Like we give the students 3 books to read. And after reading the books, they start to do discussions in groups, and they need to think about the essence of the books, like similarities, the theme, like the tonality, or even like what they want to express. And after that, they are asked to create their own books. And Man's Search for Meaning was one of the books in this list. And as a colleague was suggesting it, I hadn't read it before. And I was reading it, and it is quite a hard topic, or it's a difficult topic to read. And it's not very, how to say, in the beginning of the book, it is not giving hope so much. because maybe the English title is not giving you the hint about the context, maybe the publication date, but Emil Frankl's work is about his experiences he had in the concentration camps. So the German original title says, Trotzdem Ja zum Leben sagen, ein Psychologe erlebt das Konzentrationslager. And translated to English, this would mean, nevertheless saying yes to life, a psychologist experiences the concentration camp. So, and from this title, you can imagine what the book is about. And as I said, like the beginning of the book was quite, how to say, heartbreaking. But at the term or at the like middle of the book, he's changing the perspective, and he's also changing the tonality of his whole story. So about Frankl, he was deported to Theresienstadt, one concentration camp in 1942, together with his family. And as far as I know, he was the only one who survived the concentration camps. And after 3 years and 4 concentration camps, he was freed and returned to Vienna. And there he wrote his book, Man's Search for Meaning, within 9 days. So it must have been a very strong will of him, like to finish this work and to put it into wordings and to let other people know about the story. And as I said, like the book was at the beginning quite difficult and quite hard to read. And I also got like quite negative feelings thinking whether this is the good choice for giving it to maybe 19-year-old Japanese female students and let them read this book within the class. But after like reading the half of it, Frankl was introducing his idea about how to overcome those kind of very, very difficult and challenging and maybe dangerous situation. And his idea is the freedom of choice. And the freedom of choice, he's saying, like, this is like the deciduous part of whether you can hope about the future and whether you can get an inner hold with this hope, or you lose the hope, and this is equivalent to losing one's life. And Frankl is also telling his readers like a trick which he used in the time when he was in the concentration camp. And this was like one imagination of himself standing on a stage in a bright, well-heated big hall. And the audience, like many people, were listening to him attentively. The title of his lecture, as he was imagining, was the psychology of concentration camps. So exactly what the book is about. And this hope for having the chance to report about his experience gave him like the inner hold to overcome this time. And he almost looked at the whole situation like a research, like an experiment he's doing, and to understand more deeply about motivation of people. And so after he was freed, he became the founder of logotherapy. And he described in his research the meaning of life and also the free will as the main or central human motivation to keep on going. So like this book was for me also kind of inspiration, and maybe also the motivation to take the challenge, like to talk to you today from the perspective of hope. And in the following, I would like to tell you about like 3 cases which I just associated with the idea of hope. So maybe it begins with losing hope, especially like when we think about the situation in Kabul, Afghanistan nowadays. So just a few days, I think, after I got the invitation to this conference, I learned from the news that the Taliban have taken control over Kabul. And simultaneously, or almost at the same time with those kind of information, there were these news in the German television. So although I'm located in Japan, in Kyoto, I'm still watching the German news, and I'm comparing it somehow also with the Japanese news, like to get an update of the situation. And in the German news, they were showing these images like from a shop owner spraying with black ink the faces of the models in his show window. And I thought this action is very, very brutal. And at the same time, it is kind of self-censorship. So before the Taliban will just maybe attack the shop owner, like he will do a self-censorship by himself. And it must have been like quite heartbreaking for the shop owner, but at the same time, it must have been taking away the hope of many women who saw it, because like their faces are covered with black ink, and at the same time, I think it's a very, very destroying action. So especially like when we think about what posters and what advertising was in the first place. And this brings me to a time jump when posters were the new media. So in the at the end of the 19th century in Europe, posters started to spread. And to have those printed posters was a kind of a hope for a new time, a start into a new decade when media allowed people to have a same image or have a look at the same image at different places at different times. And this connectivity, I think, was also a sensation and also a feeling of not being separated, but more of an idea of an international world, I think. So I found this image from 1882, and this shows a street in Paris, and people looking at different posters, advertising, maybe different shows or events. And you see like the posters, they are colorful. You see women on the posters advertising, maybe an idea, maybe a dream. And at the same time, it is not only selling something or advertising something, but those posters also show a kind of an international or global inspiration, or it is like you see the idea of one nation or the visual of one nation becomes the inspiration source for another one. So Jules Chéret was one of those big masters during that time. Jules Chéret was also somebody who experimented quite a lot with lithography and became also the teacher of so many others designers who followed. And his illustrations or his posters are very famous for making a connection between the lettering and the illustration. So not separating wooden type or even black letters, but more connecting the area of the type together with the illustration and becoming like a very moving image and connecting different medias in one. But Jules Chéret was also inspired by Japanese ukiyo-e masters. So you see there like a kind of a connection between two countries which are very far away from each other. But you see the aesthetic idea of one country just jumps over to another country and helps people or helps the designer over there to create a completely new style. And this happened in the case of poster design at the end of the 19th century. And few years later, those kind of posters, like which were developed in France became then the inspirational source for Japanese designers who didn't know that the French design was originally inspired by Japanese ukiyo-e. So for example, one of the first poster master in Japan was Hisui Sugiura. Hisui Sugiura was maybe one of the first Japanese designer who intendedly became a designer. So who didn't do first like painting or ukiyo-e art, but he immediately wanted to become more into the graphic genre. And Hisui Sugiura was working for a department store called Mitsukoshi, which was at that time also a forerunner of new ideas. They tried out different medias and also used Hisui Sugiura's poster to advertise their new style of living. And here you see a Japanese woman in an atmosphere rather of Art Deco, like which was of course imported, but you see there already like a cultural mix of different sources. And Sugiura worked quite a long time for Mitsukoshi, and therefore with his work, you can also see how the design changed and how it developed. You can see on the one hand that the woman, like first dressed in kimono, is still dressed in kimono, but her daughter is already dressed in Western clothes. And in the background, you see one of the department store in 1925, still like only one car in front of the department store. But 5 years later, you see like the same or similar scenario, this time with neon signs on top of the building, with a very busy city in the background. And also this time, the woman is also dressed in Western clothes or fashion. So here you see somehow also like the hope for change, the hope for modernization and a new lifestyle. And in this case, or in the case of those poster designs, I think like you can see, like one thing is the shared experience that I talked before about, simultaneously having the access to one design at different places. And at the same time, it is kind of an international collaboration of developing new styles, and which connects me like to the idea of hopelessness in Kabul right now. In this case, the woman became more visible and more liberate, like for having their own choice and maybe going out with friends. So yeah, I go to the next case study that I selected, and this is another actual topic, the Olympic Games. So we are now holding the Paralympic Games in Japan, and maybe you know from the from the news that Japanese people were not all very happy about hosting the Olympic Games at this time, and especially like because within the time Olympic Games are being conducted, the time of the coronavirus infection rised a lot. And so it is like half-half, like half of the people, they enjoy watching Olympic Games on television, and the other half is very much worried about the outcome of it. So not in the sportive way, but more because of the pandemic. And although we have this situation, Thomas Bach, the International Olympic Committee president, said at the end of the first Olympic Games, the Olympic Games will be a beacon of hope for a better and more peaceful future. And when I heard his words, I thought maybe it's not so much about Olympic Games 2020, as they are still called, although they're conducted 2021. But it is more about 1964, when the first time Olympic Games were held in Tokyo. At that time, like Japan was still in a way suffering like from the aftermath or the effects of the Second World War. And in early 1960s, you could still see in Tokyo like the remainings or the damages of the city, still not really, yeah, how to say, still not there, like from the Second World War. But towards like the preparation for the Olympic Games, the city and the urban planning and the buildings and also the traffic system was completely redesigned and rebuilt. So in the end, like when the Olympic Games started in 1964, Tokyo looked like a modern city, or one of the most modern city at that time. And it was not only about the city planning or about the urban situation, but also graphic design became kind of a symbol of hope during that time. So maybe you know this symbol or this visual for the official Tokyo Olympic Games, which was created by Yusaku Kamekura, who was at that time like one of the Japanese masters. And Kamekura created a system of design which was very, very simple and just using minimal design elements. And the Olympic Games or the visuals of the Olympic Games before the one in Tokyo were more detailed and maybe more, yeah, they didn't have this very strong visual. But I think after 64, the whole visualization or the key visual changed a lot and became more what we understand today under logo design or also corporate design. So this is Yusaku Kamekura in 1961, and he became like one of the first and famous Japanese designers. And he had in a very towards a very early time already connections with international designers. He was going abroad and also presenting his design in the USA. And at the same time, he was educating younger designers to be more knowledgeable about what is going on in the world and about the possibilities of design. And he led the design part, or he did the art direction for this Olympic Games in 1964. And I think this poster made him very famous. So it is the main or the official poster for the sport event. And it was showing the athletes at just the starting point or just when they do the sprint. And to take this perfect shot, I think they did 50 trials just to find the right lighting and to see that all the athletes' faces are on this picture. And I think like this, this very, very high standard of perfection made him also knowledgeable internationally. And at the same time, it was not only like towards outside and towards the international design audience, like a sign of hope, but it was also like a very important moment for Japanese people in that time. So Kazumasa Nagai says about this, that poster visualizes the momentum of Japanese people towards the following economic upswing. At that time, the whole nation was entrusting the miracle of Olympic Games. Seeing the poster, all people felt strongly encouraged and saw sense in working hard. So yeah, a lot of people tell the story that after seeing this poster or after this poster was present at different places, they saw, okay, like we can work harder or we can try to rebuild Japan. And this was maybe one of the important momentum to rebuild or to rebuild the economy. So just to summarize, like this, the second idea of hope as the Olympic Games in 1964, I think like one thing was the meaning of it was to regain or to gain an international acknowledgement as a modern society. At the same time, it was an encouragement for Japanese people. And internationally, like for the design field, designers all over the world started to get interested in Japanese graphic design. And this opened up, I think, a lot of chances for Kamikura Yusaku and also his fellow designers. So yeah, let me start talking about the third idea that I connected to the word hope. And maybe I start again like with some negative thoughts, because I think another thing that is very present right now in the news is the climate change, global warming, environmental pollution, extinction of species, and also the natural disasters. So all these kind of topics, I think, are constantly on the news. But yeah, if I say so, I'm talking about maybe the German news and maybe the international news, because after coming to Japan in 2017, I was talking to my students about these problems, but many of them gave me the impression that they didn't really know about it. And so I started looking into Japanese media and found that this was quite real. But just until recently, because especially this year in July and also in August, we hear like one very distracting or very worrying news after the other. Like, for example, the extreme rainfalls in Japan and briefly after Japan in Germany. Or like 1 month later, the forest fires in California and Greece. But interestingly, like while the German news is talking about climate change and also environmental problem, which are corresponding with these changes of climate, the Japanese news is just talking about new disasters and maybe record heat or record rainfall, but they are not saying why this is happening right now. And I think this is a very worrying thing. So I'm worried quite a lot why they are not talking about the reasons for this. So this is also like one motivation for me that I have started working on this topic with my students in the class editorial design. So as graphic designers, we always need to have a content, like we need content to visualize. And so I thought maybe I can do two things at one time, giving my students this topic, letting them think about problems that we really have on this world, and at the same time learning about graphic design and learning to visualize those kind of data, which are very difficult to grasp. So I started the project Living on One Earth, and each semester I give students who enroll in this class a brief introduction into the topic. I will give them different resources, make them familiar with different news from like Germany, but also America and other sources. And then I let them choose their own topic within this framework. So just let me show you 3 of their works. Like the first one, which you see right now on screen, is from Yukino Sasada. And she wanted to think about food waste and how food waste is connected to many other problems that we have, maybe considering environmental problems. And what I really admire about her work was that she decided to do it bilingual. So while I was in Hong Kong from 2010 to 2016, it was quite normal, like to do it bilingually. But in Japan, this is maybe almost a novelty, because my students, they learn even at university English, but they are not used to apply it. So I was very happy, like when Yukino started to say that she wanted to make a bilingual book and use information graphics or use an information graphic style to talk about this topic. And she created like a very beautiful book, but still talking about the problems that are connected to food waste and also, yeah, the environmental problems. So like with very bright colors, like normally I think we see a lot of alarming images and a very negative tone most of the case, but she's using bright colors and trying to make it quite pop to get the attention of also young people. Another example that I want to introduce to you is the work by Reina Tanabe. And she is just in her second year right now and decided like to use the style of manga. And her research topic was paper. So first, like she was very interested into Japanese handmade paper, but then she figured out maybe that the naturally made Japanese paper is not so much the problem, but more those papers that we think they are paper, but maybe are somehow a hybrid between plastic and paper. So she started to research about like different packaging, which looks like paper, but maybe have other elements inside as well, and maybe be the source for some problems when they are burned or when they are just thrown away. So she has this like informational level, like which I was showing on the other slide before. And she has this storytelling element where the main person of her book, it's a girl like who is maybe in her age, is experiencing like how much paper she wastes on an everyday, in an everyday life. And in Japanese, paper is called kami, and the word for God or goddess is also kami. So this figure here, or this character in the illustration with the black hair, this is the god of paper, and the god of paper will help the girl like to solve her problems, or maybe help her to understand the problems about paper wasting. And the last design that I want to show you is from Ayaha Kato. And Ayaha, she wanted to learn more about water. So knowing that water is the most important element maybe for a human being next to air, she created a book based on her research. And for example, on one page, or on one double spread page, she was showing what will happen like if we lose water from our body, like if we are dehydrated. And like losing 20% of our hydration will be a very life-threatening moment. So she visualized those kind of data using pictograms and using this colorful charts. And the media of book was also a little bit more explored, because she made different folds and she made like different layers, so that the reader can explore the book more interactively, so that it is not only reading, not only looking, but you can just turn the page and you can just maybe turn the transparency paper and get new information. And I think this was a very beautiful way to tell the story. And here you see like one last page of her work, also like how the problems that we have with water shortness and so on is connected to our eating habits. And there she thought about like one very playful element, the water ticket, so that we can playfully look into those kind of troubles or those kind of themes. So giving the students those kind of topics or those kind of themes to work on, I think help them to think critically about, think about those challenges. And also like doing the design help them to understand the data. And also they started to do small positive changes in their daily life. And of course, they start talking about what they learned to family members and friends. And these like 3 case studies that I just shown to you, like the poster design for Olympic Games, and the student projects, I think all in all have some overlappings or similarities. Like one thing is that graphic design is a very efficient tool to communicate complex topics. And it attracts people's attention. And the way how you choose like the style also make it more accessible to the people. And at the same time, it is an encouragement and it gives hope to do a change. And just for the very last slides, I would like to say what inspired me a lot the last years. And what I hope for is like to go back to the Typography Day to India and just see the exhibitions and also the talks on site. It's very great like to be invited from overseas, and I do not have to travel, but at the same time, it is not the same thing as being there and seeing fellow colleagues or seeing other students who are very engaged into making those conferences and curating them and designing them. And it was always like a great spirit. And I took those pictures and took them back to Hong Kong or to Japan. And I also still show them to my students. And I think this is also for them a great inspirational source, and to become more playful with the media of typography and design. So I hope very much that those kind of gatherings and that we maybe share the same place and share the same times are again possible in maybe 1 year, maybe a few years. And I think also for the students who did the design for those conferences, it was always a great challenge and a great chance like to learn new things. So thank you very much for listening to my talk, and I hope to see you soon in real.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mariko Takagi. As regularly you have visited Typo Day, and your presentations were always clear and very persuadable to the audience. And I also found this time your all 3 points, case studies, were very well articulated and very effectively presented. Thank you so much for this. And it was great to see you after a long time, although online. And
yes,
and I'm receiving lots of comment about congratulating for your presentation, and people are asking, giving more comments rather than the questions. Thank you, Mariko, for taking up the topic like this for this conference. Encouraging talk, excellent talk. What are the major challenges which you face while designing? I see one question there. And now somebody is also saying this, Paralympic Games are amazing, very, very inspirational, more like a comment. Yeah? So can you tell us something about this questions that what are the major challenges you face? Maybe we will make it further more clear. Maybe in this pandemic year, what are the challenges you made? Maybe we'll make it a little more particular for you to answer.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think like because the last 1.5 years, I was mainly focusing on teaching because everything changed, and I think it surely be the case also for you, Santosh, that
Yes.
like all of a sudden we needed to change to doing everything online. And I figured out like working together with the students on site is quite different to do it online. So I just met yesterday my students because we are working on an exhibition, but we do not know whether we can do this exhibition or not, because now Japan is like very close to a lockdown. So and if the situation continues, we are not allowed to enter the university in end of September. So we are planning an exhibition and still not knowing whether anyone can come and see this exhibition. So this is like very, very difficult, I think. And also another experience, especially like during this time, was I took my students in 2019 for 2 weeks to Europe. Like we went to Germany and we went to Finland. And it was a very great trip because we can like see design just in a completely different environment. Like we visited Alvar Aalto's studio and also his house and so on. And the students took back so many inspirations, and they are still just being like very, very creative because they got this inspirational chance. But the students who didn't go, they are more just in the Japanese world. And I see in this, like just being locked down in one country, it's also a little bit dangerous, I think.
Yes.
I think for mutual communication and mutual understanding and also inspiration as a designer, we need to have the chance like to meet other people and to go to other places, maybe smell the smell and eat the food over there and see the design on site. And I think, this is such a different experience if you just do it online. And I have the same feeling for my own creation or design. Like I struggled quite a lot with taking the time for doing design works or writing. And at the same time, I feel the need of getting inspired.
Yes. Very true. And I funnily used to say that it's a very funny time we spend in this entire lockdown year taking class. And I think never before I was in companionship with typography, because I used to see only the numbers and the letters, and most of the students are mute for the bandwidth's sake, and even the video is off. So you're just facing the flat screen and numbers, and sometimes the funny mobile numbers and names, not even their names. So
yes,
this is a very different type of an experience. And of course, that has made us all of us given an experience of, and also told us the values of the real life. Maybe I didn't look at it positively. Well, great. Fantastic to listen to you and see you after a long time. And I
yes.
hope you enjoy rest of the typo day and be present for all these sessions. And thank you very much. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you too.
I think Dr. Ajanta wants to ask something to you. Yeah.
Hi, Mariko. Nice to see you again.
Yes. Long time no see.
And I completely agree with you about this on-site, off-site thing. You know, it's we are in a conundrum right now, and so nothing can be done. But it brings into focus how important it is to be in, in physical touch, to be able to smell, to be able to, see, not through a screen, but directly. So yes, I appreciate that point. I don't think I'll, even before lockdown, it had become almost fashionable to say, you know what, I don't meet my friends, I meet them on, all the social media, and then you're family members sitting in the same house and interacting through, Facebook. And I think that's the dumbest thing to do. But anyway, to get back to my observation, I've noticed that Japan has been able to draw this very fine line between opening up, the famous opening up after the 18th century, when Japan was closed, and then it opened up mostly to American influences, in a sense, because those were the first people to come in. But at the same time, perhaps because of your imperial house, and perhaps because of your very long tradition of designing, and just the tradition of so many customs, you've been able to hang on to your tradition without appearing to be traditional, because the Japanese wear modern clothing. They no longer wear Western traditional clothes, not even your imperial house, right? And yet your style of functioning at work, in factory, etc., follows very strict Japanese, a kind of Japanese ethos, and so on. And then if when I watch some of the animation films, I'm not talking about manga, what is that house of animation that we've been watching? Studio Ghibli. The characters are, so many characters are actually quite westernized, but everything is so Japanese. And that combination, it's a kind of renaissance. It's like a fusion, a renaissance of fusion, where you've managed to retain your own signature and still reach out to the world. So what do you think, how do you think that has been possible? And you say that, the Japanese students who didn't go to Finland or Alvar Aalto, never mind, I mean, they've managed to do that sitting in Japan. So I'd like to know how you did that, what you think about it.
Okay, yeah. I think this is a very interesting question, and maybe it is also related to other research that I've been doing about Japonism. So I've shown you like just 2 slides about Jules Chéret's poster design and how he was inspired by Japanese ukiyo-e master. And I think this was like at the turn of the century, 19th century towards the 20th century. Japanese people understood that Western artists and Western designers are valuing their ukiyo-es. So they understood that masters they admired are admiring their old artists in a way. And I think they understood this value at that time, and also understood maybe it is good to keep the Japanese traditional aesthetics, but just modernizing it. So in a way, like I think in, especially like if you come to Kyoto, maybe you realize it much more than in Tokyo, because in Kyoto, for example, there are still women and also men wearing kimonos to special occasions. And for example, my students, like if they are doing, or if they are having the ceremony at the end of their studies, they most of the cases come in traditional clothes. And my fellow colleagues as well. So maybe I'm the only one keeping the westernized dress. But I think like this is really like a hybrid situation. So depending on the situation they are in, like for example, also for wedding ceremonies, Japanese are doing the Japanese wedding and they're doing the Western wedding. So they are having these 2 styles. But you can also see it in graphic design, because like one very important designer, Ikko Tanaka, like who was maybe the follower of Kamikuda, was one master like who told also the Japanese designers the importance of keeping the Japanese aesthetics. And on the one hand, Tanaka was telling the Western scholars about the graphic design history or the aesthetic history of Japan. And at the same time, he was advertising it to Japanese people. And he had columns in the newspaper, for example, where he was talking about the modern design from the West and how it can be related to the traditional Japanese aesthetic. And I think this was like a very, very important connection. And that somebody tells young people, like who are, of course, very fancy about American design and about Western new styles, they got to know from Tanaka how important it is to keep this maybe also individual characteristic, like not just becoming Westernized and not just becoming like another Westernized country, but just keep the aesthetic background and keep the aesthetic essence and modernize it.
Right. Sorry. So you have Issei Miyake, retaining completely Japanese style and the whole idea of using paper and natural forms. And yet Miyake is such a Western, I mean,
yes,
such a fashionable thing around the world. And also Noguchi, although he had an American mother, but he was so Japanese, even though he lived in LA for most part of the time. And that's quite terrible.
Yes.
Yeah. Indians who go abroad don't retain any of that. I mean, don't want to get into that, but I think we are very inspired by the way the Japanese have retained the core of Japanese thinking and have used it in design. It's fantastic. So whenever you do your paper on Japanism, you should share.
Yes, I have written a few of them, but most of the case, I think in German. I wrote it in German. Maybe in the future, I will also publish in English.
Thank you, Mariko.
Okay, thank you too.
All the best.
Yes. So on behalf of Typo Day, we sincerely thank Dr. Santosh Shirsagar for chairing this session, and to keynote speakers Osman Shoma and Mariko Takagi for their encouraging presentations. We would also like to thank the participants. We now have a session break, which will be followed by paper sessions at 6 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Thank you.